Hello everyone, this one, chapter 17, is pretty big. I have a feeling it's going to take multiple parts to cover, but here's the walkthrough of chapter 17 in my notes. Remember, you can find the Word document in the week 3 questions thread under the post titled My Notes or something to that effect. Okay, let's start the process. So, animals are eukaryotic, multicellular, heterotrophic organisms that obtain nutrients by eating. This mode of nutrition contrasts animals with plants and other organisms that construct organic molecules through photosynthesis. So that's how we're now in animals, right? So Animalia, that kingdom. My brain had a moment. So we're going to go with something, we're going to kind of follow the more simplistic animals to the more complicated ones in this chapter, and it's going to be detailed. I have my source of caffeine in my hand, and we're just going to make it happen. Let's start with sea stars. Sea stars include basic stages found in most animal life. They have a male and female that make haploid gametes, remember our meiosis, and they have an egg and a sperm that fuse to create a zygote. The zygote divides through mitosis. The early embryonic stage is called the blastula, which is usually a hollow ball of cells. You just think of what early, stages of embryonic development of humans is. Similar thing. And that develops, turns into a sac-like embryo, and many animals develop directly into adults, whatever. Others, such as the sea star, develop into a larva, an intermediate individual that looks different from the adult. Think of a tadpole, which is the larval example of the frog. So we would be more like the ones that just kind of go into the adults, while there's some that do some crazy stuff. In this case, the larva undergoes a major change of body form, which is called metamorphosis, and becomes an adult capable of sexual reproduction. And let's see what's next. At the beginning of the Cambrian period, 542 million years ago, animals underwent a relatively rapid diversification called the Cambrian explosion. So it's an explosion of life. During a span of only 15 million years, all the major animal body plans we see today evolved. Although many of the Cambrian animals seem bizarre, most zoologists now agree that the Cambrian fossils can be classified as ancient representatives of the modern animal phyla. Okay? There's some crazy stuff going on. It's awesome. If you get a chance, look at a video and then send it to me if it's good. Okay. So how did all this happen, right? One hypothesis emphasizes increasingly complex predator-prey relationships. So think of our, arms battle. That led to diverse adaptation for feeding, motility, and protection. This hypothesis would help explain why most Cambrian animals had shells or hard outer skeletons, in contrast with pre-Cambrian animals, which were mostly soft bodies. So there's some type of arms race. Another hypothesis focuses on the evolution of genes that control the development of the animal form, such as the placement of body parts in the embryo. The study of the relationship between evolution and development, called evolutionary development, or Evo-Devo, is a very active of biological research. At least some master-controlled genes are important for the development of diverse animal phyla, right? So maybe there's like a combination of these two. Like, is it possible the arms race was helped by the development of specific genes? Who knows? They're doing research. Historically, biologists have categorized animals by body plans. So do you have like bipeds, quadrupeds, lots of arms? What's going on? General features of body structure. Distinctions between body plans are used to help infer the evolutionary relationships between animal groups. More recently, a wealth of genetic data has allowed evolutionary biologists to modify and refine those groups. Because remember, sometimes stuff evolves just because where you're living, not because of who you evolved from. So let's do some definitions. Radial symmetry. This is identical all around a central axis. Think about a jellyfish, a starfish. A shovel has bilateral symmetry, or human beings, so the left and the right sides are basically the same. What is a body cavity? A body cavity is a fluid-filled space separating the digestive tract from the outer body wall. The cavity enables the internal organs to grow and move independently of the outer body wall. The fluid cushions them from injury. In soft-bodied animals such as earthworms, the fluid is under pressure and functions as a hydrostatic skeleton. If the body cavity is not completely lined by tissue derived from the mesoderm, it is called a pseudocolon. Among the animal phylum discussed in this chapter, which is like everything, only roundworms, nematodes, have a pseudocolon. A true colon is a type of body cavity in humans and many other animals and is completely lined by tissue derived from the mesoderm. Despite its name, pseudocolon functions just like a colon. It's just called pseudocolon because it's not quite the same. Right? And remember, pseudo means fake. Think of your word sections. It helps. Invertebrates are animals without backbones. Okay. Sponges. Let's go basic. Sponges were once grouped into the single phylum Porifera. However, genetic evidence now suggests that there are multiple phyla in there, so sponges are actually more complicated than originally thought. Sponges, the reason we thought they were so basic is they're just stationary animals that appear so sedate that ancient Greeks believed they were plants. The cell layers of a sponge are loose federation of cells, not really tissues, because the cells are relatively unspecialized. Of the 9,000 or so species of sponges, only 100 live in fresh water, the rest are marine. And here's like a good little video, or probably link, we'll say, because Enchanted Learning, it's more like a document, on what sponges look like. It's really good for a lot of these things. Make sure you look up a picture if you have a chance, or a video, so you can see what they look like and go, hey, that's a sponge. Sometimes pictures in the book aren't the best. Okay, so now let's look at cnidarians. In the phylum Cnidaria, these are characterized by the presence of body tissues. So the sponge, we were just like loose cells, not doing much. Now we have specific tissues, as are all the remaining animals what we discussed. So if we're doing our phylogenetic tree, we're now in a different little clade. As well as radiosymmetry, so we're still with radiosymmetry, and tentacles with stinging cells. Cnidarians include sea anemones, hydras, chlorals, jellies. Most of the 10,000 cnidarian species are marine, so we're mostly doing in the ocean. Makes sense because that's where life kind of started, right? The basic body plan has two variations: the standard polyp, so that's where it kind of looks like a plant, and the floating medusa. Think of your typical floating jellyfish. That would be the medusa stage. Polyps adhere to larger objects and extend their tentacles waiting for prey. The examples of the polyp body plans are hydras, sea anemones, and corals. A medusa is a flattened mouth-down version of a polyp. It moves freely by a combination of passive drifting and contractions with its bell-shaped body. Some jellies are medusae with tentacles over 100 meters long, dangling from an umbrella up to 2 meters in diameter. So actually Monterey Aquarium has a really good example of this, since I just went to their jellyfish exhibit, and it's very awesome. So if you get a chance, look up jellyfish on the lovely YouTube, and I have, the oceanic research here. It's so beautiful, just very mesmerizing. So now we're going to move on to snails and slugs. Oysters and clams, octopus and squids are all mollusks in the phylum Mollusca. Mollusks are soft-bodied animals, but most are protected by a hard shell. Slugs, squids, and octopuses have reduced shells, most of which are internal or have lost their shells completely during their evolution. Many mollusks feed by using a file-like organ called a radula to scrape up food. Garden snails use their radulas like tiny saws to cut off pieces of leaves. I just had like a snail invasion in my yard, and they can kill off a squash plant. This is covered with mucus, very nasty. A visceral mass containing most of the internal organs and a fold of tissue called the mantle. The mantle drapes over the visceral mass and secretes the shell if one is present. So think of like an oyster. It's got the shell. Inside the shell is what you're going to actually eat. And inside of what you eat, the mantle, would be the visceral mass with everything in it. Okay? Get to look up the picture as always. Oh, I gave you a nice one here. Gastropods are protected by a single spiral shell into which the animal can retreat when threatened. Right? Animal diversity, very good site. Let's check it out. Checkpoint, don't care. Let you go through it, see what you've learned. Cephalopods are all marine animals and are generally differ from gastropods and sedentary bivalves, and that their bodies are fast and agile. A few have large, heavy shells, but in most the shell is small and internal, as in squids, or missing as in octopi or octopuses. Okay, so let's move on to flatworms. Flatworms, which are so beautiful if you see the oceanic ones, they just float, are the simplest animals with bilateral symmetry. So remember, this means left and right are the same rather than being circular. And tapeworms are parasitize many vertebrates, including humans. So they're kind of flatworm kind of thing. Lots of links. And this is just link happiness because, you know, you kind of have to see it to know what you're talking about. Annelids are worms that have body segments, which is a subdivision of the body along the links into a series of repeated parts called segments. I would think earthworms here. One is a complete digestive tract, so they have a complete digestive tract, which is a digestive tube with two openings for a mouth and an anus. So we finally got to stuff that has a mouth and a butt. Not everything just comes out one opening. A complete digestive tract can process food and absorb nutrients as a meal moves in one direction from one specialized digestive organ to the next. In humans, for example, the mouth, stomach, and intestines act as digestive organs. A second innovation is a body cavity, which in this case is a colon. So now we've gotten a true colon. So let's go down and look at earthworms. Earthworms, like all annelids, are segmented externally and internally. You just think of it in your mind, it has that little bump in it, you know, it's got segments. Many of the internal structures are repeated segment by segment. The colon body cavity is partitioned by walls. Only two segment walls are fully shown here, which would be in the book, and I give you a link. Polychaetes are marine, mainly crawling on or burrowing in the seafloor. Segmental appendages with hard bristles help the worm wriggle about in search of small invertebrates to eat. The appendages also increase the animal's surface area for taking up oxygen and disposing of metabolic waste. So while we're going through this, keep thinking, what is the adaptation that helps this animal so that it stayed at maybe this level of complexity? Why is it able to thrive? Versus the next animal, it's a little bit more complex. How did this additional adaptations help it better to survive? That's why they're hanging out at whatever level they are on the tree bush of life, because that's where they're able to be successful and thrive. They are doing well in their environment. So don't think of it like as a sponge, as some ancient thing that still exists. It is able to thrive in the niche that has chosen. It has not needed to have some huge change because it is perfecting what it's doing at its level. Okay? And we're going to go into a third group of annelids are leeches. They are notorious for blood-sucking habits of some of the species. However, most species are free-living carnivores that eat small insects such as snails and insects. You know, I need some leeches, kill off those snails. Let's stop here for this part. We'll see how many parts it ends up being, and go to the next video to see the rest or the next section on chapter 17. I hope it's helping.